Today, we're looking at the story of Elisabeth Fritzl, a name that's become synonymous with an almost unimaginable horror. But what's so wild is that this case didn't start with a crime report or a police investigation. No, it all started with a trip to the emergency room, an event that would end up unraveling a secret that had been buried for 24 years.
So to really get our heads around this story, we actually have to start at the end. It all began to fall apart because of one single unexpected event: a very sick teenager showing up at a hospital. Okay, so picture this. It's April 19th, 2008. A 19-year-old named Kirsten is rushed to a hospital in Amstetten, Austria. She's unconscious, her organs are failing, and the doctors are scrambling for answers. And the man who brought her in, well, he had a very, very strange story to tell. The doctors were completely baffled. Kirsten's condition was incredibly severe, but they had zero medical history for her. The grandfather, a man named Joseph Fritzl, claimed that Kirsten's mother, his own daughter Elisabeth, had abandoned the child on his doorstep years ago after running off to join a cult. But, the story, it just didn't add up. Something felt wrong. So the doctors made a desperate public appeal for the missing mother to please come forward. Now, just think about that for a second. For 24 years, there was total silence, a complete void. But after the doctors went on TV with that plea, it took only 4 days for the entire nightmare to completely collapse. So why then? Because, completely unknown to anyone, Elisabeth saw that appeal on a small television inside her prison. After years and years of failed escape attempts, her daughter's life hanging in the balance finally gave Elisabeth the leverage she so desperately needed. She argued relentlessly with Joseph, convincing him that she was the only one who could give the doctors the information they needed to save Kirsten's life. He finally gave in, and he opened the door to the cellar. On April 26, 2008, Elisabeth Fritzl walked out into the sunlight for the first time in 24 years. When the police began to question her, she made her one condition crystal clear. Once they promised she would be safe from her father forever, she revealed a story so horrifying it was almost impossible to believe. 8,516. Just let that number sink in. That's how many days Elisabeth Fritzl was imprisoned, abused, and tortured by her own father in a secret windowless dungeon that he built directly beneath their family home. And during those 24 years, she was not alone. She gave birth to 7 children, all fathered by Joseph. One of them, an infant named Michael, died just shortly after birth. 3 of the other children were taken from her and raised upstairs by Joseph and his wife, who actually believed they were abandoned runaways. The other 3, they remained trapped in the cellar with Elisabeth, never once seeing daylight until they were rescued.
But this just raises a massive question, right? How was this even possible? How could a man keep his own daughter and 3 of his grandchildren prisoner in his basement for over 2 decades without anyone, not his wife, not tenants in the building, not the neighbors, ever knowing?
Well, it all started with a simple fatherly request. On August 29, 1984, Joseph asked 18-year-old Elisabeth to help him hang a door in the cellar. But it was a trap. He held a cloth soaked in ether to her face, and when she woke up, her life as she knew it was completely over. She was a prisoner. You see, Joseph was an engineer, and he had meticulously designed this prison. It was his own private kingdom. The walls were soundproofed, the entrance was hidden behind a shelf, and it was secured by this heavy, remote-controlled steel and concrete door that only he knew the code to. And to make things even more terrifying, he told Elisabeth and the children that if they ever tried to escape, the whole cellar would automatically fill with poison gas. And this was the truly chilling duality of the Fritzl home. Upstairs, you had this seemingly normal life. Joseph played the part of a concerned grandfather, raising these 3 abandoned children with his wife, Rosemary, who was totally oblivious. But just a few feet below them, he was a monster, controlling a secret captive family in utter darkness. This, of course, brings us to the most terrifying question of all. Why? I mean, what could possibly motivate a man to commit such unspeakable acts, especially against his own daughter? Well, in his own bone-chilling words to prosecutors, Joseph explained his motive. It was a perverse desire for total control, a need to act on what he called the forbidden fruit. He actually compared it to an addiction, admitting that even though he knew he was hurting her, his urge for power was just too strong to resist. And, this wasn't his first violent act, not by a long shot. Back in 1967, he was convicted of raping a woman at knife point. He served just 1 year in prison, and under Austrian law at the time, his record was wiped totally clean after 15 years. This critical warning sign, this proof of his violent nature, was effectively erased, allowing him to present a clean face to the world.
So, after the truth was finally revealed, the entire world watched as Josef Fritzl was brought to justice for his decades of absolutely unimaginable crimes. He was charged on 6 counts, including rape, incest, and enslavement. But the most serious charge was murder by negligence for the death of that infant, Michael, who he refused to get medical care for. And unbelievably, his initial plea to the 2 most serious charges, murder and enslavement, was not guilty. Just a shocking display of his total lack of remorse. But after a few days in court, after being faced with hours and hours of Elisabeth's powerful video testimony, he changed his plea to guilty on all counts. On March 19, 2009, Josef Fritzl was sentenced to life in a secure psychiatric facility, making sure he would never, ever harm anyone again. But the final and really the most important part of this story belongs to the survivors. Elisabeth and her 6 children were reunited. They were given new identities to live a quiet life, healing in privacy. Their ordeal is just this harrowing reminder of human darkness, but their survival, that's an incredible testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power to endure the unimaginable and finally begin again.